think it's probably too much to say is the common ground for most of disinformation, but I think that one thing that's important to say is there's a distinction between the kinds of populism that we're talking about. We generally think of populism as being the one on the political right, the Front National in France, or UKIP in the United Kingdom. But it is important to make a distinction between that and left-wing populism and other forms of populism. Cas Mudde, who's a Dutch academic who works in the United States, said maybe it's better to use the word nativism instead of populism to distinguish these right-wing groups. So that would be, for example, parties that are pushing for the rights of the native population over an immigrant population. I don't know if we have to battle populism. I think what we have to battle is simplistic arguments that are maybe coming out of certain elements of populist politics. For example, in relation to something like immigration, for example. The best way to do it is essentially to meet it head on, I think. To have discussions, and when misinformation is presented or disinformation is presented, you combat it by countering it with factual arguments. Disinformation, whether it's populist or not, whether it's just disinformation in general, is best met with information, and also to educate people about the places that are producing this disinformation, that they're aware of these things. But it's a very difficult thing to do because many of the people who follow these populist news sites or websites are supporters anyway. So to convince them to change their minds is extremely difficult. But that's the best you can do, is to give information, I think. It's become one of the big issues. You see it in Germany, you see it in France, FN in France, AFD in Germany, Sweden Democrats. Immigration is clearly, and Brexit and UKIP in the United Kingdom is clearly the angle that they're pushing, and then you see it even in the United States. Trump's election in 2016 was very much driven by an anti-immigrant rhetoric. So immigration is used in a lot of ways as an umbrella topic to cover many things that go underneath it. So problems with education, problems with healthcare, problems with crime are all directly linked to the question of immigration. So for many parties in Europe, they become very much sort of one issue parties, which is essentially immigration. So a lot of the disinformation campaigns that come out tend to focus on that as their main area because it's emotional, it gets people very angry, and it's also a very sort of simple answer to complex problems. Well, during the Cold War, we had this sort of discussion about left-wing politics. Is that the thing that's really going to destroy European or U.S. culture would be left-wing politics. And we go all the way back to McCarthyism in the United States. And we saw it in Europe with the Cold War. In the 80s and the 70s, political parties would be accused of being traitorous if they were too left-wing, because we saw just a few hundred miles away on the other side of the wall what would happen, on the other side of Berlin. Now the Berlin Wall has come down, so we don't have that Cold War politics split between communism and capitalism. A new thing has come in to fill that vacuum, and that in large part has been immigration. So in the same way that communism was used as a political tool, now immigration is used as a tool. I think that it's very difficult to say if it's a planned campaign, but clearly Sweden is a country of 10 million people, and why Breitbart, for example, or other outlets would be so obsessed with Sweden is very difficult to explain if it's not something that's clearly planned. And countries like Sweden have certain symbolic value. Sweden has always been known as a social democratic country. It's been known as ethnically homogenous, but it's also known as the country that took in so many refugees and immigrants from Syria and also previously from Iraq. So in that way, it becomes a very simplistic way to frame all sorts of arguments about policy and politics and immigration. Why would people be so obsessed with it? And it's not simply because people are worried about poor Swedes. They're worried about it because Sweden has a very important symbolic value for people who want to make arguments against the welfare state, against social democratic policy, and against immigration.